The first indication that something was amiss, aside from what had now become the usual, was the drones. Humans may not have wings, but they have never stopped dreaming of flight. This is yet another of the strange traits among humans, is that they have the insatiable urge to do things that they can't do, shouldn't do, and would be insane to do. Man was not meant to fly, so he made a way to do it anyway. Dlamisa developed flight by accident. Zenti developed it out of desperation. There are many reasons why intelligent races developed flight and space travel, but only humanity developed it out of a desire to do what they could not do, and to fulfill the dreams their race has held to since ancient times. Now, it is so common that they turn flight into toys, namely drones. Most races have them, but none in such vast numbers as humans who use them for almost every task from the delivery of fresh food, mostly pizza, which as of this entry I have yet to try, to package delivery and more importantly on this particular day, news reporting. Drones painted in the color of various agencies raced over homes and sidewalks and descended on the front of the Walker household like a swarm of locusts. Among those that were painted with legitimate corporate logos, there were others that were either black or painted in various wild colors. In the aftermath of this event, I took the time to study the use of drones in human history and, in a very strange way, the drone culture that developed after the creation of the first camera-mounted drones encapsulates humanity's enduring ability throughout their lives to experience childlike wonder. Most species who engage in heavy investment in the rearing of children pass through a stage in their youth where they are endlessly fascinated by everything around them. A boundless curiosity and a desire to know new things is part of their maturation process. But in humans, this trait does not necessarily die. I say necessarily because it can. And when it does die inside someone, they are like the walking dead. But when it remains alive throughout a human's life, as I would live to see, you have living treasure. Drone culture is a microcosm of this wonderment, always trying to see what they haven't seen before and experience vicarious flight through the use of machines. But then again, there was that moment. When the drones descended on the house of my humans, the guards from our respective governments remained alert, and a cacophony of voices shouted through the speakers. I regret to this day that I found it such a struggle to be close enough to hear it all, but I did hear some of it amidst the chaos of bobbing, hovering plastic and metal machines that I could see through the window. Are the walkers here? We want an interview. What really happened at the park? Is it true that an alien attacked a human? Was the alien given special treatment because he's a foreigner? Is this part of a wider threat to humanity? Is it true that the alleged victim knew the human who was attacked? Was this set up? Is it true that William Walker once worked for a defense contractor specializing in living weapons development? And that Rebecca Walker used to clerk for disgraced Interstate Departmental Relations Chairman John Hsu? Humans. They are natural storytellers. In the absence of knowledge, they will begin filling in their own details and imaginations for just about anything you can imagine. Sadly, there is another side to this, a side I was hearing. While most humans are xenophilic, fascinated with other living beings, the universe at large, and eager to learn, there are others who are xenophobic. Human supremacists who reject the idea of sharing their world, or even the galaxy at large, with other intelligent beings. While they are a minority, they are quick to jump on anything that they think might support them. Ironically, they fail to realize just how not dangerous most other intelligent races are in comparison to themselves, since prey races tend to evolve intelligence rather than predators, and the most common survival trait for those races is to flee. Lurid stories of the short war with the Zenti are passed around in xenophobe circles, with horrendous atrocities imagined that even the Zenti could not have done, even if they wished. For these xenophobes, fear seemed to be their chief focus, fear and hatred, and some of these were well enough connected and well-funded. The storytelling nature and political nature of man was an ugly unification. Have you filed a lawsuit against the park, the owner, or the perpetrator? Why has nobody seen this mystery girl that was allegedly attacked? The people deserve answers. Of course, not all of these were the common corporately affiliated reporters. Rather, there was a wide variety of others here, short-form video makers, bloggers, vloggers, and various other individuals seeking out a possible source of content. Humans, humans, humans. At this moment, perhaps this reads more like a journal of my life than a serious academic report, but a crowd like that, All those machines pointed toward me, and even without the people themselves being present, I could still feel a lot of hostility before I got out of earshot and headed toward the basement to hide myself in my room. My tail shivered, and all my worries, so recently alleviated, were back again. I did have the presence of mind to realize that whoever was behind the presence of hostile questioners or reporters, as they are commonly known, probably hadn't gotten word of our mutual governments getting involved. I closed the door to my room and sat on my bed. On the shelf sat the balloon animal the officer gave me before. I had it sprayed with a clear coat of enamel to preserve it. Against my will, I was scared all over again. The specific words were impossible to discern any longer, but the hubbub and noise was still loud enough that I couldn't hide from it, even when I covered all 8 ears and pressed them tight against the fur on my skull. It was then that I heard the muffled noise of a knock at the door. "Bailey, can I come in?" Fauve asked. I nodded stupidly a few times. "Are you there?" she asked. Face-palming is not a gesture Dlamisa use, but if it were, I would have used it. "Idiot, she couldn't hear you nod," I thought, and said, "Come in." She opened the door, slipped inside, and shut it behind her. Her cracked red eyes had a puffiness around them that was characteristic of recent emotional outbursts, and her cheeks were flushed as if she were ashamed. "I'm sorry you got in trouble over me," she said, and sat down on the bed beside me. Her hands wrung together and her feet shuffled on the floor. "I didn't mean to. I really didn't. I just wanted to swim. I wanted us to all go have fun. I didn't mean for anything like this." She gestured in the direction of the exit to the house that led out to the driveway, where our bodyguards' voices began to go up in an ever louder shout. "To happen!" "Fauve, what are you talking about?" I asked. I was baffled enough that my hands slipped from my ears, and she slipped her hand into her pocket, pulled out her data pad, and after unlocking it, she handed it over. Whatever was on there, she couldn't say it, so I looked. "If you'd just gone with him, if you weren't dressed like that, lead him on, of course, he's going to think..." Fauve's frustration came out in her voice while I read. "He grabbed my arm. I was scared. He wouldn't let go. But maybe if I'd just hugged him goodbye, then none of this would have happened. Maybe he would have let go." She pursed her lips tight and took a deep breath. "Then you wouldn't have gotten handcuffed, and none of this would be happening." There is a particular oddity in humans, something I've never found anywhere else in the galaxy. Admittedly, I've only been to 50 or so worlds, and I've only met 100 or so intelligent races, but I doubt very much this oddity would be repeated elsewhere. And that oddity is something commonly known as main character syndrome. A variant of this is called spotlight syndrome. They are very similar conditions endemic to most humans, either persistently or sporadically. These syndromes refer to the belief found in a person that everybody else is focused on them in some way. Everybody is watching me, noticing me, thinking about me. The distinction between the two is in the favorable versus unfavorable standard. Spotlight pertains to the belief that all their flaws, foibles, missteps are being noticed and magnified for all the world to see. It is anxiety-inducing. By contrast, main character refers to a more favorable self-image in which a person believes that they are the star of the show, they are the protagonist, and everybody else is just a side character in the drama of their existence, or an antagonist they must defeat. Human children in the course of their maturation have both of these in their heads in some way. A very young child will assume everything is about them. Our mother and father fighting. The child will believe it is their fault. They are quick to blame themselves. This is in part because their empathy takes time to develop, and until it does, until their brain has reached full maturity, some level of self-centeredness is the only way they can be. This helps them survive as they learn and grow, but it also makes them very vulnerable. Parents who place blame on their children for things their children didn't do will suffer horrendous developmental side effects precisely because they cannot imagine things being any other way. What I was seeing was Fauve in her worried state, accepting blame for something she had no responsibility for, not that I could see. Outside, the noise of the drones and our agents shouting both grew louder. "This is a very strange world you have here, you know," I said, setting the data pad on the mattress. I leaned back, my own fears forgotten for the moment. My hands on the soft mattress, I looked up at the smooth ceiling. She cocked her head at me and asked, "What do you mean, Bailey?" "That failed human, he was an adult, wasn't he?" "I didn't bite an undeveloped one?" I asked. "I don't know, I think so. If he's working full-time, he has to be an adult. Underage people aren't allowed to work a full 6-hour day." she answered. What does that have to do with anything? Them, those far-off people they're giving you, a small human who isn't even grown, a whole lot of power over a grown-up. It seems strange. I thought grown-ups were always supposed to be responsible and in charge. Am I wrong? I asked her, and she actually chuckled a little. No, you're not. I wasn't trying to do any of the things they say. I just wanted to go. But if I'd just done what he wanted. She frowned, and her body shook with barely suppressed anger. Did you have to? Is there some rule here that if an adult male grabs a female of your species, she is his until he lets her go? I asked. I was fairly sure there wasn't. No! Fauve exclaimed. Angry tears ran down her cheeks. I didn't want to go with him. I didn't want his hands on me. I was just going to swim. I was just minding my own business. All I did was smile at him and wish him a nice day. Then he came over to me, and I tried to get around him, but he wouldn't let me. He kept blocking my path. He kept that creepy smile on his face while he was demanding my name. Then he told me that the park was his dad's and said he could get me onto rides for free if I was with him. The way he said rides made my skin crawl. Fauve hugged her arms around her body. He was gross and crude. I just wanted to go, so I told him some other time, and tried to be nice instead of making it clear by being nice. Maybe if I'd shouted for help then. Maybe if I'd told him no some other way, or louder, or maybe if I hadn't slapped his phone away when he tried to get too close and forced me to get into frame with him. Maybe he wouldn't have grabbed me that hard. I made him mad and... I lowered my ears. She missed the gesture. But when I said, I get it, and I'm not even human. You make a pretty good Lamisa, Fauve, but it sounds to me like he understood but didn't care. You can't blame yourself for his decisions, and how could you predict the decisions of a Dlamacin exchange student? I let my jaw drop open to bare my teeth and let out my imitation of a human laugh. You protected your choice. That's a right here, isn't it? I asked, and she sniffled, rubbed some stray snot from her nose and gave a little nod. So then what are you apologizing to me for? I asked, and shrugged, finally turning to face her. I'm decades older than you, even if my race is longer lived. If we proportion it to humans, I'm older than you by at least a few years. You didn't make me do anything, you didn't make Wolfbeard do anything. All you did was exist and try to live your life. As an anthropology student, I can tell you, there's nothing wrong with that. Nowhere I know that is, except, I guess, in the heads of Wolfbeard and people like him. So don't be so hard on yourself, okay? I winced as the shouting got louder and reflexively covered my ears, shut my eyes, and looked down. Are you okay? Fauve asked, inching a little closer to me. I regretted the poverty of curse words in my own language. I'd forgotten. Fauve didn't know why we came back early on the first trip. William hid it from her. I'll be fine. It's nothing. We just have to wait until the people outside get rid of them all. They may just be machines, but crowds are still... They're not things my kind deals with very well, I admitted. Too much noise, too many smells, too much stimulation. It hurts, but it'll pass. Don't worry about it. Another peculiarity of children is the nature of their resolve. Human children have an innate sense of justice. Sometimes it is wrong. One child will take a toy from another, or rob one another of their treats. But they have a natural sense of when they are being wronged. It may take time to develop empathy for others, but they know very early on what wrong feels like. And when a human child is wronged, the whole world knows it. In theory, this stops when they're very young, but in reality it just changes. And Fauve was a particularly stern young girl. I could see her already starting to rise to her feet, the wheels turning in her head, while she prepared to give the reporters outside a piece of her mind that they would not soon forget. Once again I thought to myself, she would make a good Dlamisa. Then, after a lingering look at me, when the noise outside grew again, she sat back down and put her hands on my head so that her fingers were over mine, giving further protection to my ears. And as the sound outside became a little bit duller thanks to her gesture, I thought, but she makes a better human. I was soon proven right when I heard an echoing voice that could only be a human using an amplifier to magnify his words. Per an order signed this morning, and due to the sensitive nature of the topic, all interviews must be scheduled through the legal representation of the household occupants. Anyone loitering on or near this property or releasing footage of the residents of this address will be arrested for compromising an investigation directly impacting the security of the Terran government. The sentence for which is 1 hour's confinement. Leave, now! The drone's spoken voices were silent, and a moment later the steady hum of their hovering flight began to fade away. Perhaps the 1-hour confinement seems to be very little in the way of punishment, but herein lies one of the most dangerous facets of human creativity. They have a long familiarity with how to hurt each other. They are masters of torment and suffering. They are not the masters of their world and the top dlamisa of their food chain because they are the strongest or even the fastest. They reach the top because they are the single most homicidal, vengeful, blood-hungry species that their death world has ever spawned. And they turn that venomous violence on each other more than any other species I know. For centuries they punished crimes with mostly either death or mutilation, or they would sentence people to become tools that work, known as slaves, or they would confine people into place, leaving them to suffer and die. But with the long arc of the arrow of justice, they began to enact more just penalties that fit their crimes and did not encourage more criminal activity. Centuries in the past, robbery was punished by death. But so was murder. So a robber would frequently murder his victim because, why not? He lost nothing and decreased the odds of capture. Pragmatic and sensible reforms were often subordinated in favor of exploitative ones, and one nation which formally banned the sale and ownership of humans included in their constitution an exception that allowed humans to be used as slaves as a penalty for crimes. It wasn't until years before the advent of their modern unified government that this finally changed. But what does this have to do with their petty punishment of confinement, you may ask? After all, are they not too soft now? No. With confinement, a human is placed into a room, strapped into a seat, and then when the machine is activated, they experience something very different than the normal world. While a minute can pass in the real world, as little as 1 or as many as 10 years can pass in the realm of their mind. A Terran hour is 60 minutes. Their 1-hour confinement is an offer to let a person experience a 60-year sentence, growing older, weaker, sicker, all while believing it is real. They experience a cast of characters and even alternative dystopian worlds. They may live out a lifetime as a slave in a mining camp from the novel series Who Endures, or they may find themselves living as a barely surviving primitive hunter from Scales of Trust, or they may just experience being locked in a room with no human interaction, experiencing the nightmare of minute upon minute of a life slipping away. This technology has its benign uses, but in terms of their punishment of crimes? True. The sentenced party will wake up eventually and find that they are their youthful selves again, and only a little time has passed. But the memory of their time trapped in the imaginary world was never going to go away. A more benign use of this technology is to use it to help criminals engage in reform, gaining help from artificial intelligence-powered therapists who help heal the broken pieces of the human and rejoin society. But this is not an option for every crime. That is the horror of confinement. It is rarely used save for intervention purposes, or the more severe threats to the public. Interfering with a government investigation would be one such circumstance. It was warning enough to get the drones to leave before they started getting traced. Though knowing how persistent humans tended to be once there was a mystery or curiosity or something else of special interest to them, even if it were just bragging rights, let me just say I suspected from the start that it was a temporary relief. Fauve listened to the same growing silence before asking me, "We're going to have to speak publicly soon, aren't we? All of us? And I'll have to face that disgusting orc again? You're a child, I'm no expert, but I think they make exceptions for you." I said that without thinking, and the truth is, it was a lie. Not that I wasn't an expert, I definitely wasn't, but I had no idea one way or the other. But the haunted, heavy eyes of hers were so full of dread, I just wanted her to feel optimistic. The relief on her face when she leaned back the same as me, stretching out her legs and holding herself up against the mattress with her arms behind her, made it worth it. Her breathing relaxed, and normal color returned to her face, a little bit at a time. It's strange how humans change things, how they change their world, themselves, each other, and as it turns out, even wandering alien university students from beyond the stars. Not that long ago, I wouldn't have considered lying just to make someone feel better. I wouldn't have attacked anyone, let alone attacked on someone else's behalf, especially if it put my planned career at risk. But now here I was. Not only had I done both things, but I'd done them without any regrets. Or rather, any regret but one. And now, while it was quiet and I was full of gratitude and welcoming her company, and she was at least briefly relieved of fear, I thought I should tell her. She put one hand on my tail and began to rub her palm back and forth over it, pressing it into the mattress on which we sat. Like my professor said, if a human initiates physical contact, you should assume you have been adopted. I think he was right, and all three of my hearts ached. I have to tell her. I realized. I didn't want to, but if things go that way, Dlamacen bureaucrats do not play around with rules and orders. I've been lucky so far, at least. I told myself, steeled my nerves, and while she stroked and stared down at my swishing tail that moved like it had a mind of its own. I need to prepare her now. I told myself again, cleared my throat, and looking out of the side of my eye at her face, I said, Fauve, you know they may make me leave Earth, no matter how this comes out, right? I asked.